Hey everyone, my name is Yarrow and you're listening to the Daydreaming Wolves podcast. Thank you so much for spending some time with my show. I know you probably have a ton on your mind. There is a lot of anxiety in the air right now. We are dealing with a lot of uncertainty 2 weeks into a global pandemic, and I'm just glad to be able to connect with you at least in this way. I've been self-isolating for 2 weeks and I really miss humans, so it feels nice to listen back to this episode and bring it to you and just know that we're sharing space in this way. And if you have any wishes or requests for something that you would like me to send out or record or talk about, please let me know. Please know you're not alone in this, and please be sensible and be safe. I spoke to Kathleen of Daughter of Once for this episode, which I really enjoyed so much, and it was really, like I said, beautiful to listen back just now. Kathleen is so magical and grounded and real and really relatable to me. I received several readings from her, which I still really treasure. They're currently on sale for $25, so check that out through the link in the show notes if you're interested. And she also offers a ton to her patrons. She's a really beautiful artist. Is currently creating a deck, and I think so worth supporting. So I hope that brings some comfort your way, and that you enjoy the episode. I am offering a grief tending circle on Sunday that you're also invited to. We're going to do a little bit of really gentle breath work, some self-massage, some journaling, and a little bit of meditation. I just feel really inspired this week to see what people are offering and how we can stay connected that way. And I probably mentioned this, I trained as a death midwife and grief celebrant last year, and was mainly kind of wanting to really confront my own fears around death and make more space for grief in the practices that I offer. And I had wanted to kind of give myself a lot more time to learn more. I had these stories that I wasn't quite ready yet to offer something public, but I feel really called now. I think now is a good time. And so we'll meet on Sunday for 45 minutes. It's going to be a really gentle practice. It's okay to cry. It's okay to not be in video. It's donation based. So you can just donate $2 if you like, or you can become a patron. I really want to make this as accessible as possible, and I think that it will be nice to connect that way. So if that feels interesting to you, please check it out through the link in the profile as well. And again, thank you so much for being here and for listening. I'm sending lots of love and wishes for safety and protection your way. Everyone, welcome. I'm really excited to speak to Kathleen of Daughter of Once today. We just had a nice little giggle and some sips of coffee. She is such a wonderful practitioner. She offers tarot readings. She also works with astrology. She makes really beautiful art. I've just had a look at her shop again before starting this interview, and oh, really good stuff. And so, yeah, really excited to speak to Kathleen. And I also want to say I received a birthday reading from her, and I don't say that lightly. It was really, really beautiful. I've listened to it many times, and I think there's something really special about being able to create intimacy and shared exploration in a reading that isn't live. And I actually like them much better anyway, because I get overwhelmed and kind of always feel in live readings I can't take everything in. And it felt so special to receive this recorded reading and to be able to hold on to it and kind of listen again and untangle all the different threads. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. Really excited to talk to you, Kathleen.
I'm so excited to talk to you too. Thank you so much for having me. And that was such a sweet intro. Thank you.
Yay. So, because sadly not every listener can join us in time and space, I would love to ask first where you are in the world right now and what nature is like around you.
Oh, good question. Yeah. So I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, here on the East Coast. Um, here for me, the Philadelphia is a little bit like right in the middle of the East Coast. It's right in between, the South and the North. So it kind of gets this weird mix of weather around this time of year. So it's actually not too cold right now. We have some weird, like warm spurts, but apparently it's supposed to snow later today too, even though it's only it's like 45 degrees. So I don't really know how that's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, weather outside. And as someone like me who is a very keen observer to nature, this is definitely a time of year around me where the grass is still slightly a little bit greener. It's not too brown yet or dead. There's still so much life around this time of year, but you know, there's lots of seed pods that are opening right now, and lots of fluffy Saturn-like plants that are showing their beards of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And some evergreen trees that we have that are, evergreen, and as well as trees that are showing their skeleton around this time of year too. So
Mm-hmm.
not too bad.
Mm-hmm. That
Mhm.
sounds really beautiful. Thank you. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your story. And obviously, I know a little bit about it already. I've followed you on Instagram and I know your website. But for anyone else, can you tell us more about how you found those practices that you're loving, or how they found you, and what your life has been like so far?
Oh boy.
I know, right?
Yeah. Um, well, I think I'll share how I came into tarot, which is probably the longest relationship with, well, maybe that and art, I would say. But in terms of the modalities that I practice professionally with Daughter of Wands, I think tarot is the longest relationship that I have to these modalities and practices. And I, just like most, maybe, I don't know, 13-year-old girls, um, I was at the Renaissance Fair for a class trip one day. And yes, I was dressed up in Renaissance gear. And I came across one of their stores in the fair, and I saw a bunch of tarot cards, and I was immediately intrigued. I bought this deck that I never use now. It's super hard.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I was learning on this really, really hard deck. So for the longest time, and it's so funny because I can go back and actually have found some of my journals from 13, 14, 15-year-old me. And I had this one deck that I would pull cards all of the time and constantly, but I never felt quite connected with the images in terms of like making my own intuitive decisions about them, because it was a pip deck.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one of those cards that didn't have like the Rider Waite does, the traditional tarot that a lot of us are familiar with when we, Google tarot, when we see those images. That a pip deck is basically like the minor arcana, like
Mm-hmm.
the Five of Wands, for example, is just 5 wands. Like there's no story or image on the card other than
Mm-hmm.
just 5 pieces of wood.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to read from a deck like that when you're just starting out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So for years I had that deck, and I would basically just read the book. But I also knew that, doom and gloom type, your fortune with the card book was very like difficult for me as a 13-year-old to be in touch with. So it still like was something that I was still drawn to, though. I didn't let that like kind of get in my way a little bit, but basically, like I said, I found all these journals. Almost every year I would sit down in a fresh journal and write out every single card and the meaning of it.
Mm-hmm.
And typical mutable energy me, I would never finish it. I would never get through 78 cards, but I would start with the major arcana and I would work through it. And I basically just try to memorize it through writing it. And I probably have about 4 of those throughout the course of my early teenage and late teenage years. So of course that never really stuck.
Mm-hmm. But what a cool document to have now. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. I'd have to, I would like to actually display them somehow.
Yeah.
Just have to get them all out. But yeah, so when my dad actually one day saw me with these cards, and he actually shared that he used to be a tarot reader in the 70s.
Wow.
And I had no idea. He never told us that about himself. And I was intrigued, of course. And I asked him to tell me more. I asked him to teach me. But he reached a certain point with his relationship with the tarot where he basically put it away for good. And he never wanted to work with it again because of his own superstition. And, you know, in the time, you know, who knows? I'm sure there's so much to the story that he didn't even share, but he has his own reasons. But basically stuff started coming true, and that really actually freaked him out.
Mm-hmm.
So he actually put them away, and he never taught me the cards. So I still had to go on learning them in my own way. But he definitely supported me, and I think he was excited by the fact that I was still doing it. But he never really shared any of his stuff with me. The only thing that he shared was that very traditional way of reading the cards with a signifier, basically pulling one of the court cards out to represent the querent or the person that you're doing the reading for, which I don't resonate at all with. So that's the only thing that he shared. And so maybe it makes best sense that I learned in my own way. But yeah, and so I, you know, you go on, you live your life,
Yeah.
you grow up, you graduate high school, and you go into college. And I went to art school here in Philadelphia. And, you know, so I was very, you know, studied around developing my skill at that time. And I left that tarot deck and the tarot cards at my mom's house, you know, at my home when I lived away at college. So it wasn't until after college that when I moved into my own place, pretty much right after school, I brought that deck with me. And I also got a new deck. I got the Rider-Waite, like the very traditional, the deck, so that I could learn a little bit easier. And, you know, basically being in my mid-20s at this point, I went through a pretty dark period. I'm not going to lie. It was probably the darkest so far in terms of emotional upheaval and pain, and just really had no idea who the fuck I was.
Yeah, so relatable.
Yeah, you know, I really had no idea who I was, but also thought that I was still invincible, and was just surrounding myself with people that I think, with all the distance of it now, looking back on it, almost crazy, almost 10 years ago, that, you know, with the distance of it now, I can say that, you know, I was meant to be around those people to really show me that I wasn't meant to be around those people.
Yes.
But it took me a long time because, you know, I wanted to be part of a group. I wanted to have friends. I wanted to be liked and loved. And I did that in somewhat abusive ways to myself. And so I started to realize that those patterns, and I started to realize how unhappy I was. And so I just, on a whim one day, decided to pull up my tarot cards. And I honestly don't even remember the cards that came out. The only one that I think I remember, it was like a basic 3-card spread, I think. And the devil was in there. And at this point, this is the first time coming back to the tarot. And remember, I wasn't really like in tune with the cards still, even though I thought that I knew tarot, you know, because I was working with them since I was 13, blah, blah, blah. So I thought I had this idea of like, oh, I'll read my cards and I'll immediately understand what it means. And of course that wasn't true, but also almost magically, I guess it was at the right time, you know, right moment, right time, where I pulled these cards and I did actually know exactly what it was trying to tell me, probably because and that the devil was the card that showed up for me at that time, where I was. And I think it's so prevalent to the way that I work with the devil now. And we're recording this in Capricorn season, which is, you know, the devil's ruled by Capricorn. That I was aware of the self-defeating and self-betrayal patterns I was aware of the patterns of my life that were in the long run harmful to me. And the devil was almost like that immediate illumination of, oh, actually, I can actually change it. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually not the end of the story, and it's actually the beginning of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's oddly enough, that was like right around the time when I, was kind of done with that lease on the house, and everything kind of fell into place after that. Like later that week, I decided to go on. This is really silly, but I decided to go on. I was like just dating a lot of people, not seriously, because I had been hurt so many times. Honestly, the reason why my mid-20s were so painful was because I was just so deeply hurting myself through choosing to choose people that didn't love me,
Mm-hmm.
and abused me that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I chose to continue to abuse myself through shitty, like, forms of just having sex with a bunch of people, just
Mm-hmm.
not really engaging with real connection and harming myself in that way, emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I mean, again, is another reason why the devil probably showed up there too. But I was really tired of doing that to myself and feeling like I didn't actually deserve a partner, that I actually didn't deserve love. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to get, and this is the time of like online dating, like, OK Cupid and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
was really popular over here at the time, 10 years ago. And I made it a profile. And I actually, within that week, found the person that I am still with today.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
Wow, how
Yep.
magical.
Yeah. So the devil and the tarot brought me the most beautiful partner, that
Mm-hmm.
I'm still with this year. In a few months, we'll be celebrating our 7th anniversary. And it brought me through him. It brought me having 2 amazing cats and,
Mm-hmm.
incredible support through my partner to actually quit my full-time job and do this work full-time. Without him, I wouldn't probably have the courage to do it. And so it led me to all of this in some way, some
Mm-hmm.
magical way. So that's my relationship to tarot. And
Mm-hmm.
after that, um, it wasn't until many years later that I actually decided to study the tarot. Like,
Mm-hmm.
really, I did some work with Lindsay Mack of Wild Soul Healing, um, or Tarot for the Wild Soul. I did a couple of her online courses for the past couple of years. Um, there's a local tarot reader, Eric Dupree, who I've also learned a lot from. Sarah Chappell. Uh, I think you're familiar with her work,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 of course.
I did work with Sarah, who's amazing. So I really decided to step into tarot more because it actually showed me what was capable,
Mm-hmm.
through the process of witnessing yourself, basically. Um, so that's where I'm at now, and I decided to take that on professionally. And yeah, and right now I'm fusing my love for tarot and astrology with my talent, skill, resources, and love for drawing. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to create my own tarot deck now.
That's so exciting. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really, really, really cannot wait to see that unfold. And thank you so much for sharing that. What speedy magic, hey? A speedy
I
OK
know.
Cupid magic, I would say.
I know, it's so silly that it actually was like just online dating, but it just happened
Yeah,
so quickly.
yeah, that's amazing. I don't think that it's just online dating. I think it's just as valid as any other way of meeting someone, isn't
Oh
it? And I
yeah.
think in many ways it's more introvert friendly, which I really appreciate. So that's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I wonder, like through all of this and in building your own business and navigating the world and, building social media and all that, what are the practices for yourself that you really love coming back to? Maybe as you close your week or as you start your day, what feels nourishing to you at the moment?
Yeah. Um, well, okay, so um, I'll be honest that, and I definitely have shared this on my Instagram at least a couple months ago, um, that astrology, I'm a self-taught astrologer too. I mean, I've definitely taken lots of courses and stuff online, but I'm definitely self-taught, and I'm like proud of, like I'm a Sagittarius. I like like to teach myself everything I can.
Mhm.
Um, so that's been a set the past 5 years or so. I'm also a self-taught herbalist too. Like I'm a self-taught everything.
Mhm.
So the past few months, or at least this year, astrology has actually felt a little bit draining to me.
Mhm.
And I think and this is just me witnessing my shadows. This is me just naming my shadow coming out
Mhm.
with this. So I'm very honest about that here, in the fact that I was realizing, as astrology becomes more mainstream, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm super excited about that. Um, I witnessed a part of me getting a little defensive and a little bit um, competitive, that side of me coming out when I was witnessing all these other people on Instagram, on social media. Of course, social media can be so triggering
Mhm.
to our imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
And that's what I felt like that's the side of me that I felt like was engaging with astrology specifically. And I didn't
Mhm.
like that, but I was aware of it pretty much immediately. And so therefore it almost felt like astrology was no longer a tool
Mhm.
for reflection for me. No, it was no longer a helpful tool. And because it was almost triggering this competitive shadow side to me. And I, at the time, chose to not sit with that and escape that, and also step away from something that was triggering. And in a way, it was like me being inner parenting in a way to myself,
Mhm.
to kind of do something that felt safe for me at the time, or do something that felt more authentic, quote unquote, or that felt healing to me. And at the time, this was during the summer too, so it wasn't that long ago. At the time, I decided to really to not look at my transits, because it just felt too heady. It felt too intellectual. It felt like um, anybody could say anything about what these planets mean, and it still doesn't really like mean how I'm embodying it. And
Mhm.
so it felt like a very disembodied, intellectual, rational approach that was surrounding me around astrology. And I just didn't like it. So I parented myself around it, and I decided to not look at astrology for like 2 months. And I went back to my artwork. So my artwork was incredibly healing for me as a process to come back to myself. And I also knew that I had wanted to do this tarot deck for the past 2-3 years, and I never acted on it because it was actually really terrifying to me. Even though I'm trained as an artist, and like I said, that's actually the longest relationship with any of those modalities. Is I took art lessons when I was like 5. Like it's like the longest thing that I've been engaged with. And so, and my dad was also an artist too. There's a lot of stuff that my dad used to do that I kind of carry on a
Mhm.
lot. Anyway, so drawing to me was the most healing thing that I worked through in my personal practice that I actually didn't share. I just recently started sharing it on Instagram. But I had been doing it all year pretty much, especially since last spring. When I had lots of physical pain, I would draw what was in my body.
Mm.
I used it as a modality to understand what was happening in my experience. Then I started using it to kind of channel just images. I sat on those for a long time, and then I decided to finally do something with them and offer them to the world as I just sat down in 15 minutes. I had 12 drawings in 15 minutes, and I realized, oh shit, there's 12 drawings. These are the 12 signs. And I created a little booklet for what encapsulated the Pisces experience, if you're a Pisces, for 2019, basically. So like a year oracle, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really healing for me. And for the longest time, I just sat with these images and I didn't feel like I needed to share them. And then I started creating more and more and more, and creating creates more creativity. So that honestly has been the most surprising and healing thing that reminded me of who I am, and has been super fulfilling and nourishing for me, because I get a lot out of it too. It's not just it's not even about me creating work for an audience anymore, like maybe like how it used to be. One of the my full-time job that I stepped away from a year and a half ago was I was an artist for the fashion industry. And I got a job, like a full-time, real legit job, with my very obsolete degree from college, which is textile design. So I went to school for weaving and printmaking and surface design. But I got a job as basically a textile designer for the fashion industry. So basically what that meant was I would create repeat patterns. Basically, if you have a printed type of fabric, like an image on fabric, I would be the artist that would draw that or create it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fun at first. That was really soul draining, to be quite honest, because I was one of the people that worked on the custom team. So people would come to us and I would basically draw what you want me to draw. And I had no say in any of it, which is fine. But also, the fashion industry is very trend based, which means that everything that I had to draw was a ripoff of another artist.
Mm-hmm.
So that really was terrible.
Yeah.
You can only do that for so long,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's just not worth it at all. So the whole reason why I'm talking about why it's such a big deal for me to draw, essentially at this point in my stage in this journey, is because I did that for years, and for about 6 years. And by the time I stepped away from it and I was like, I'm going to do a tarot deck, the reason why it was so terrifying to me was because I had no idea what my own hand looked like as an artist. I had no idea what my own style looked like, what images would naturally come out of me without having the need to kind of go back to the way of how I used to have to always draw inspiration from someone else's artwork, So that was the scariest thing, to like be original, actually. And so I didn't draw for the first year, and for the first almost full year, maybe 9 months, maybe more like 9 months. I didn't draw at all after I left that, because I needed to just not draw. And then it was Aries season when last April, when my business was super slow and I was freaking out. And I just decided to start drawing. and that's when it all kind of began to click back in place. And I never looked at anything, and I just kind of started drawing what was in my mind when I was meditating. And then before I knew it, I was like, oh, I actually have I'm noticing that there's patterns of certain motifs that I use. I actually do have a certain style that's developing, that it took me a while to kind of tease it out of me. And now here I am. And as of right before we started recording, I finished my first card for my deck. And it's the devil.
Oh my God. Wow. Are you going to share it?
Right now I'm only sharing my previews of my images on my Patreon, actually. So if anybody wants to see the progress of the deck coming up to life, it's only available on my Patreon, but it's through any pledge level. So you can join for $1 and see the past, everything. There's so much on there that I offer even at the $1 level. And that's just kind of to protect my energy, basically, and the work that goes into it. But at some point, yes, I'm going to be sharing it. I might even make a separate Instagram for it. Who knows? But yeah, and I actually have already a few images, but they've actually been kind of evolving. The style has been evolving. So I think where I'm at right now with the devil has been okay, I think this is the style that it's going to be. I also do have the Wheel of Fortune up on my Patreon too. And that one's pretty intense. I might actually add some color to that one, but it's basically, I'll share what that one is. It's a whirlpool with a little frog that's kind of surfing on a lily pad as it kind of gets swirled closer to the center of the whirlpool. But yeah, the deck is going to be all nature based, so there's no humans in the deck. I'm a very nature or plant based person, so it's going to be very like I said, basically no humans. It's basically the natural world. A lot of it's if you ever read the book series, I think the book series is actually called Earth's Children, but it's the Clan of the Cave Bear. It's the Clan of the Cave Bear is the first book in the book series by Jean M. Owl. And so it's a 7-book series that was written. It first began in the 80s, and she's been writing more books, but that basically takes place in Neolithic times, basically Cro-Magnons. And the main protagonist is a woman who is basically an herbalist. So there's Neolithic herbalism in it that is just so fucking fascinating to me. And just this time period when we were so close to the earth, that's kind of the inspiration for it. But I'm just removing humans in general. I just prefer it to be to nature itself to teach us about the mirror of the human experience in nature too. And that's so much about, I think, the core of my belief actually in just being a human. I see so much of the mirroring in nature and the importance of that. That's what I worship. That's my religion is nature. I'm sure that you resonate on some level with that.
Oh yeah, totally. Yes. That's really exciting. I feel so tingly about 2024 myself, and for you and for many people. I think that there's going to be some really cool things that will come forward because we really need them. I want to say more than ever, and I think it's also kind of not always helpful to compare the pain levels of different times in human history. But I'm sure you know what you mean. This work is needed, and I'm very excited for it. So that's great. And thank you so much also for sharing a little bit more about the struggle and the little turns that you made, because I think that's so important that we talk about that too. So easy to compare ourselves on Instagram and think that things have always been easy, and one day someone woke up and had an epiphany for a business, and then it was an overnight success, and everyone lived happily ever after.
No, yeah, it's just so not, because you get to filter what you share
Yeah,
out there,
yeah.
and so there's so much that people don't share, which is also like like their own boundaries. Like
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to share our pain constantly,
Yeah.
in order to be relatable.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about that. I think it is important to be private on some level, to have your own private experience. I think is important in life too. Like we don't always have to share and put everything out there on the table for people, but at the same time, I've also really witnessed how much people can come together through sharing, through being vulnerable. And in fact,
Mm-hmm.
oddly enough, although not surprising, when I'm the most vulnerable on my Instagram is when the most people reach out to me.
Mm-hmm.
When I share my stories about my failures as a person and even in business, I'll just put it out there. Like surprisingly, shockingly, sometimes I just feel really called to be like, look, here's the deal. Here's like, this is part of reality. And I'm learning this for the first time. Um, I've never, like, there's no one in my family who's ever been self-employed. So this
Mm-hmm.
is a first. I don't have a role model for that. I don't have anyone to ask for help when it comes to doing, like, I'm the first one in my family to go off on my own and be self-employed. So no one can really like understand or help me with that, which is fine, but it also makes it slightly difficult on some days. I'm also the first one in my family to go to college. So I'm the first one with all the student loans.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're actually like an ungodly amount of money.
Yeah.
So, I share my struggle with that. I also I'm also pretty vulnerable, and like, I'm here. I'll just tell everybody now, like, I don't have any shame in the fact that like, I'm, I actually went into bankruptcy when I was not even 30 yet
Mm-hmm.
because of my student loans. And so, and now and now here I am, like, self-employed. Every single dollar that comes to me goes towards my student loans, basically. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's definitely challenging. And I'm not going to lie, there's definitely like days when I wake up and I'm like, why the fuck did I decide to do this? Why did I decide to make my life so much more difficult? And, like, there's definitely days where I have that. And, it's challenging for sure, but it's also like, I look back and I'm like, but I'm so much more happier.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so much more happier and honored that I actually have the capacity to help people. Like, that was never a possibility with the work that I just came from as a full-time job. Like, that, even though I created art for people, like, that didn't make the world go round. I'm sorry to say, like, it didn't, you know what I mean? Like, it really didn't make the world go round. It really didn't help people. And in fact, it was helping people who were fucking getting their fabrics printed in sweatshops. Like, it was very icky. And, when I decided to leave that, it was, now I have the distance from it about like a little over a year ago. And it's an honor to say that I get to wake up and actually serve and
Mm-hmm.
actually make a difference and actually help people. And that's what I'm here for. Like, even though I'm fucking like broke and every cent goes towards paying my student loans, I'm honored that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a privilege, and it's so amazing that I'd still rather pick this over having a job that over money,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm wishing you so much abundance and just, yeah, so much support for all the beautiful things that you're offering.
Thank you.
Um, and yeah, you totally deserve it. And I really think that you are really supporting people in super beautiful ways, having experienced that myself.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if people are listening. I'm really jealous, for example, that you went to art school, and I know how difficult it is to live with the burden of student loans now. I'm also the first person in my family to go to university and to
Mm.
start a business. So I relate to that in many ways. I'm very lucky that in Europe, study fees aren't so high, so usually our
Mm-hmm.
loans are lower.
Mm-hmm.
But still, that's
Yeah.
really tricky. And um, I wish I had gone to art school. I was really just not courageous enough when I was a young teenager. I had a boyfriend at the time who did go to art school, and
Mm.
I thought we would be together forever, and I thought that I would have
Mm-hmm.
to be the responsible one. And so
Mm.
I
Mm.
started working and then did a distance degree in really sensible stuff. So, and now
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking art classes and really rediscovering that
Mm.
for myself. Which brings me to my next question. I'm wondering, like, how do you touched on this a little bit, and I love listening to that. When you were speaking to feelings of like resentment, maybe, or shadow aspects coming
Mm.
through in the work with astrology, and then you reclaimed a totally different part of your creativity. And I wonder, like, how does that look like to find that balance and kind of tap into that creative expansion on a day-to-day basis? Like, do you give yourself pep talks? Do you have little
Mm.
rituals that help you feel creative? Or like, what kind of resistance comes up both in creating and also in the sharing of that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for asking. Well, yeah, it definitely was and still is a process that through daily integration is helpful, but it's been several month process so far. And one of the best things that's been helpful for me is actually doing like shadow work stuff. I actually had a trade with around in early November. Her name is Kuan Yin, and she does emotional alchemy, actually. And I was like, "What's that?" And it's basically shadow work. And she was her Instagram is Kuan Yin, and that's spelled KWONYIN. And so she was really helpful. I had a great session with her when we just talked about all of that and shadow work, and basically addressing, like, going deeper and deeper and deeper to the roots, to the root of that, to the root of that, and kind of going back into these memories and these things that I didn't even realize were actually really early childhood memories, that where all of these things kind of began. And so just knowing that and acknowledging that was really helpful to begin with. And then, I had this question of, well, astrology right now is almost painful. So I'm going to quote unquote escape or choose to use the word reparent myself with
Mm-hmm.
artwork, because that's healing.
Mm-hmm.
And in that process with Kuan Yin, I was asking myself, well, does that mean because it's really triggering for me right now that it's actually worth it, that I'm meant to stay there and meant
Mm-hmm.
to kind of go into that shadow? And the answer is yeah. So I actually realized that that's where the balance started, the integration and the balance started happening. That it wasn't, because it was several months where I was just not, like I said, about 2 months where I was just choosing to ignore that shadow, to just choosing to ignore and just heal myself with art. And it wasn't until having this realization of, oh, actually the triggering stuff and the hard stuff is what is worth it to sit with.
Yeah.
So that was in November. That was not that long ago. And
Mm-hmm.
ever since then, it's almost like having that realization allowed me to come back to astrology in my own terms. And actually, even what I was talking about with the tarot deck, that I see nature as a mirror for the human experience, or that offers us medicine. It's been here much longer than us, and it has so much wisdom to share. And we choose to see ourselves as separate from it, which is not true. that coming back to astrology through nature, actually, through things that made me feel, it's almost like I forgot that I had the authorship to come back to something that was painful in ways that make me feel connected to what I'm actually connected to, if that makes sense. So instead of looking at astrology and engaging with, I chose how I was engaging with it. I was choosing to filter my engagement with it in ways that felt more comfortable to me and felt more safe to me. So like I said, instead of like looking at an ephemeris and looking at all these numbers, things that are slightly harder for me to grasp or kind of super intellectual, which is why I kind of stepped away from it to begin with. And what if I just chose to go outside and walk in my favorite park and see what this plant has to share with me about nature, about astrology instead.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I started to come back to astrology, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how so now that's kind of like how I'm kind of coming back to everything, actually. So that's my daily integration. That's my daily work with healing some of these shadow aspects, is actually sitting down and looking at them and doing I don't even have a word for it. And I do this in my own practice a lot, where if I'm feeling a certain way, I actually did this yesterday because I got a piece of mail that really triggered me, and was really scary for me. And so I decided this just happened yesterday. I decided to sit with that fear.
Yeah.
And I was really tempted to actually, surprisingly, play a video game.
Wow, cool.
to escape from it, though, and I recognize that to not deal with it. So I actually was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to sit with it. And I basically closed my eyes and took, with a few breaths, I decided to witness what my body was physically trying to communicate to me in that moment. Because we all hold emotion, especially when we're triggered in a very specific circumstance. Like for me, it was getting mail. Because it reminded me of getting mail and getting like these giant student loan checks that are bills that I didn't have the money for, and how was I ever going to survive, literally. And so I sat with it and I named where in my body I was experiencing this, like what in my body was knocking on the door, so to speak, what was getting my attention. And I felt it in my stomach. And so I said, okay, it's in my stomach. So I'm going to, almost like magic school bus style, kind of get real small and dive into that area of my body with my consciousness. Like if I were to do like a journey, basically, and I went into my stomach, or the area where I was feeling anything. And in this case, it was fear. And I started seeing red immediately. And I knew, okay, I'm not in my stomach, I'm in my root chakra. And I just kind of was open, and I didn't force any images. I'm a very visual person, as you can tell. I'm an artist. So when I journey, I see things very clearly. And everything was red, and I arrived at this beach. And I'm telling all the story, but this is just to kind of bring home to like this practice, basically. So I was really open and just beginner's mind, not trying again to kind of force any symbolism or any experience. I was just kind of going, okay, root chakra, you have my awareness. Besides, before even going, what are you trying to tell me? I just tried to arrive at that place and see what my surroundings look like. And so I was at this beach, and it was almost like if you were watching a film that had a red filter on it, like everything was just red. And I saw on the edge of this beach, where almost like I was on an island, where the jungle met the beach. So it was like right at that liminal space of like land and sand, like land and beach. And there was a cave, and I saw myself standing outside of this cave, but I looked really scared, and I was gathering wood for a shelter, and I was panicked. Like I was gathering wood, but I wasn't paying attention. I was looking outward and almost waiting for someone to attack me, basically. And I was very panicked. And that's pretty much the extent of what I saw, but that gave me enough to go off of and realize that it was fear, that I wasn't going to, that I was basically this fear of not existing, this fear of being attacked by some unknown outside force, that everything was going to be taken from me, that I worked so hard to build, essentially, you know? And so that's pretty much on a very deeper level, this feeling that I get when, you know, I get the bill statement, and when I'm really nervous about like doing taxes and all that stuff that I'm just not familiar with at all. And so that's been a daily practice when I have those triggers, to step into it and not to escape from it, so that I can understand it and reparent my scared and wounded inner child with it. Just by a daily practice of sitting with that, and also trying to just understand where those memories even come from. And so that I can almost like rewrite the internal, like the default operating system in my mind of, you know, the side of me that's engaging with shadow, the side of me that's saying I'm doing everything wrong, that I'm a failure, that I'm not meant to do this work, that it's hard because you should stop doing it, you know, like because you're not on the right path. All of those things that we tell ourselves in our worst moments, or when we're our own worst critic, that we have the ability to rewrite that. It does take time. And that's like what I'm in the process of. And that's the devil as well in the tarot, is that we have the ability to author and rewrite a new operating system. That it just takes time. And for me, that's a daily practice that is super helpful for me and my clients that I do a lot. Also walking in nature and using nature as my teacher, as opposed to kind of thinking that I need to learn everything from a book.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think I just want to honor you for having the courage and capacity and the wisdom to slow down at a point where slow down and come into embodiment and reprioritize that at a time that can be so anxiety inducing. I think that's like a really amazing learned skill that we all really need. And I think that it really weaves into all of the work that you do. And I love what you said about reparenting yourself. Again, I think that's so important, and there's so many ways to do that. And yeah, I think I would just encourage anyone listening to think about what that means to them. And it doesn't have to be, you know, exactly what you and I are doing or anything in particular, but just sitting with that for a moment when anxiety comes up or anything like that. See, like, what would reparenting myself look like right now is such a powerful, really, really, really good question to ask, I think.
Yeah. And that's also, that's something that I was automatically doing. And when I worked with Kuan Yin, that was part of her practice. And I was like, oh, this is something that I do too. And I've been, and also her name is Energy Archaeology on Instagram. She's also great. Her name is Ashley Stinson. You would also probably love her work too, Yarrow, but she does, she's an energy worker, but she specifically she's a much more like intuitive, like almost like a medical intuitive. She probably wouldn't call herself that, but she's almost like a medical intuitive. She's very knowledgeable around the human, like bones basically, and the energetic properties of the human body and how we embody, like she's just incredible. And I've learned so much from her too, with that practice actually. She really teaches embodiment, and she does a lot of free stuff and a lot of like accessible work as well. She has taught me how to basically do that practice to get into the body when we're feeling a certain way, even if it's sadness, loneliness, or fear or anxiety, is to actually come to actually just acknowledge it, because that all stems back from when we're super young, basically, and we have these same experiences of big T trauma and little T trauma, right? So even if we're told, like, like as a kid, why are you wearing that? You don't, like, did you dress yourself? Like, you look stupid. Like, words like that, like, are actually harmful to us, but we're so young that we don't actually know how to process it. And so in those moments, the energetic body does like a split, basically, and we're suppressing our response or our emotional reaction to that for many different reasons. Again, one of them may be that we don't actually have the capacity at that age or time to understand what's happening and to process it. And then other times as we get older and that happens, and we're told to not cry, for example, right? Like, we're told to suppress that cry, and our bodies still carry that even 30 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why in the moment, we don't want to re-traumatize. We actually want to, when little things like that, for me, getting mail was super triggering. That's why I was like, you know what? I actually got to practice what I preach. And I can't play a video game right now to escape from it. I actually really need to do the work and sit with it. And just even from the beginning, to just accept and acknowledge the fact that I feel a certain way, that this is happening. Because then you're telling your body, yes, you're real. This is real. This is valid. And it's okay that I feel this way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's just the first step. And that's the first and probably the biggest step that I think is hard for so many of us to take. But just acknowledging the fact that you feel anxious can be such a huge game changer. That can really move you forward in a lot of ways. And then you have, the more and more that you practice that, the more that you're able to kind of quickly connect with the body and quickly kind of move out of the mind and come back down into the heart, into the root, into the shoulder, anything in the body that reminds you, that anchors you to something that's safe, that your body is safe. And that's also just like a huge rewriting program for a lot of people too, is that some of us believe that our body isn't safe for many, many different reasons. But when we kind of come into embodiment, and especially when we're witnessing our triggers, which is our shadow kind of coming out in those moments, trying to speak to us, by acknowledging our shadow, that's how we do shadow work. That's what that is. We're, and the vehicle to that is the body. It doesn't have to be about talk therapy, which it totally can, but this is also a free resource.
Yeah.
That every single one of us is capable of. We just have to remember that our body is a vehicle for doing shadow work too. And it is, and it can be super, super safe.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no wrong way to do it, really. You just have to kind of, what I always recommend people, especially clients who have full-time jobs, who have stressful work environments, and they can't necessarily like do a meditation in the middle of their desk space with other people around them, that I always recommend for people who work in a space like that, are surrounded by other people, to actually just get up and go to the bathroom, close the door. No one's going to bother you in the bathroom at work or even in your house, unless you have a kid or a cat who busts through the door with no privacy. But I'm saying because my cat's totally busted on me in the bathroom all the time. But yeah, that you can go into the bathroom, close the door, and you're already in a safe space where no one's going to bother you. And no one has to know what you're doing in the bathroom because nobody's going to ask. To just close your eyes and breathe and acknowledge what part of your body feels activated at that time, and just acknowledge that. Okay, I'm feeling my shoulder is in a lot of pain for some reason. Wow, I didn't notice that until a second ago because I actually took a breath and asked my body what's happening, as opposed to thinking that it's all in my head. And so that shoulder pain actually stores a memory or a story or an emotion. And so you're asking that shoulder in that moment, for example, to dive in and to show you what's going on. And it's mostly going to be symbolic. It may actually be everybody's experience is going to be different. You may hear, taste, smell, touch something different. But for me, again, I'm usually pretty visual, so I'll see things, and a lot of my clients tend to see things that are like symbolic or not actual like real life memories, but are more symbolic because that's how the intuition talks to us, So I remember one time someone might say like, oh shit, I realize that there's someone who's got like who's carrying like water buckets, and she's super overloaded, and so we have these connections that way. So that's a really helpful practice.
Yeah.
Hopefully is helpful for anyone listening too.
I think it is. I love what you said about the body being this free resource. And I think there's so much wisdom now that's often really easily overlooked. And creating those spaces of privacy to really listen, it's so beautiful. And in some ways common sense, and in other ways I think we really need to remind each other that we deserve to take up space for that kind of stuff, because it's really important and it really makes a big difference. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Welcome.
I have so many more questions, and I would really love to talk to you forever, and maybe we can speak again this year. I really would love to do second interviews with people, so if you're up for that would be great.
Absolutely.
But before we go, I would love to know what are you currently offering and where people can find you.
So right now I am offering, I open up I open it up 4 times a year. So right now it's currently closed, but I am offering that astrology group astrology mentorship, so to speak. That's through nature, actually. And it's called Cycles of Becoming. And that will reopen for enrollment in the beginning of the spring. So for Aries season, that will open up, and each seasonal cycle will open it up to new people. And basically we learn astrology through the lens of nature together and we learn from each other in our own experiences. So that's really fun. I'm doing that right now. Again, that'll open in probably April or March. And then I also just offer natal chart readings, tarot readings, and I do distance energy work. So for example, the stuff that we were talking about with the embodiment, that's more of something that we will do either in a tarot session or in a energy session. And then I also, you can buy my artwork as well. My Patreon is where I do a lot of work, and that's patreon.com/daughterofwands. And my website is just daughterofwands.com.
Thank you so much. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. So if anyone, the puppy chat starts chewing on my leaf. So if anyone didn't catch that, it will be in the show notes as well. And your Instagram is also totally worth checking out. It's really beautiful. I mean, I love all your visual work. It's really beautiful. Thank you so much for today. It's been really beautiful to talk to you, and I can't wait to talk again. Thank you.
Oh, likewise. Thank you, Yarrow, so much.
Thank you.